Yo, what's up everybody? Jumping here. Today I'm going to be showing you guys my in-game Weapon Ranger build for Anthem. Now this build is extremely powerful with every single weapon in the game, and that's what makes it so much fun, because if you can get a god tier weapon, this build will just make that weapon even better. So that is awesome. Now you might be looking at this and say, okay, 498, that's pretty good. Well, this is not actually the build that I'm going to be showing. I only have this on to show you guys that I'm not some low level guy who I don't know what I'm talking about. I am higher level, but the thing is that everyone plays GM1. That's the reality of it. Nobody really wants to play GM2 or 3 just because every enemy is a bullet sponge, and on top of that, your drop chance isn't all that much higher, so there's really no point to play it as of right now. So the build I'm going to be showing you guys is really meant for GM1. You can always switch things up if you do want to play GM2. I have done that multiple times with this build, and it does actually work effectively, but at the same time, every time I've ever done GM2, I've never really even attempted GM3 to be quite honest, but every time I've done GM2, it's been the same thing where I'm not really getting any more drops, and on top of that, it's taking a lot longer. So the build that I'm actually going to be showing you guys is actually level 474. And the reason for this is because from what I could tell, it seems like at 470, you will actually do more damage to the enemies. See, your numbers do not change whenever you're fighting enemies, but you will notice that you will actually one-shot them a lot easier at 470. That's at least something that I've noticed, but if I go to like level 498, I don't actually like kill them quicker, so that's just something I wanted to point out. Now, like I said, this is a weapon build, and the reason why it's actually lower is because of the components. We're going to be using 2 purple components, and that is because we're going for the weapon damage. The first component is going to be the impact damage component, and the other one is just the general gun damage component. These will stack with the actual masterwork components. So an example of this will actually be that I have the impact component on, that's masterwork, and I also have the weapon one on, that is masterwork. Now overall, this component combined with this one will give me 85% impact damage. Now, impact damage is any damage that is dealt to a single target. So this will affect your gun damage. I've tested this multiple times, and this absolutely is a huge buff to your gun damage. So as long as you're not using something that has blast on it or AoE like a grenade launcher or maybe the Devastator, you are pretty much good. Impact damage is going to affect your bullet damage. And obviously your weapon damage being buffed is going to up your weapon damage. This one actually has the added perk that if you actually take some damage and you're low health, you will actually get more gun damage. So that's really nice. And then the final one also just will increase your gun damage by 25%. Now, one thing about these components is that I'm actually trying to stack some impact resistance if possible. This is something I do recommend trying to do if you can. Impact resistance is pretty much defense against anything that will deliver impact, like bullets. So this will actually make you more tanky by finding items that will have impact resistance on. If you do not have any, you can always craft them. Another thing you can actually do is actually just craft these purples over and over again until you get a really good roll, maybe one with luck if you're trying to farm, or whatever you might think that you need. So that's one nice thing about purples, is that you can just craft them over and over again until you actually get one that you actually really want. Now for my other components I have on, one is going to be the increased combo damage. This is nice just because it allows me to restore my health, also allows me to restore health of other allies. And then the other one is actually just here for a couple reasons. I do like the fact that the recharge rate of the assault launcher is reduced by 35%. I really don't ever defeat that many enemies with my melee, and on top of that, I'm not using a damaging grenade, so because of that, this extra perk is pretty useless. But at the same time, this comes with impact resistance, so I have like a grand total of like 56% impact resistance, which is really good. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for all that. Now moving on, let's actually talk about the weapon that I'm going to be using in this video. Now I already made a video about the Pop-Up Pump and why I love it. Well, this is still my favorite weapon in the game, and with this build, it is just ridiculous on how much damage you can actually do with this gun. Now this gun actually has 175% weapon damage on it. This took me forever to actually get. I crafted it multiple times until I finally got one that would come with 150% 50% weapon damage. That was my goal, was to try to get one of those. I actually won up that. I got 175%. I don't really want the harvest bonus on there, but it's whatever because this is pretty much a god roll. The only thing that can make this better is if it was a legendary that also came with about the same amount of weapon damage, maybe even more. That would be fantastic. Now, a couple other weapons I really love to use with this build especially is actually, one is the Thunderbolt. This one I have came with 150% weapon damage, 30% critical. But the main thing about this weapon is that this thing just shreds. Whenever you actually do get the perk to trigger, this will actually do crazy damage. Now, I've done some testing and I was curious, would blast damage potentially up the AoE effect or the lightning damage? And I was also thinking maybe that would be elemental damage. But from my testing, it seems that the damage that you get off of all the weapons that has elements like fire explosions or the lightning explosion, they are all based around weapon damage and impact damage, because whenever I nerfed my impact and weapon damage, my damage from my lightning went down by a lot. Now, another weapon I have that I really do like with this build, just because it's so powerful, I have to actually find it here. It's a pistol. Well, there it is. I've just found it. This one right here. This thing is freaking crazy. It has 150% weapon damage on it. But the main thing about this is that whenever you hit a weak point, this is a 2-round burst pistol. So whenever you actually hit a weak point, most of the time you're going to proc the perk, and you actually have 300% weapon damage with this. This thing is ridiculous, and I really, really like it. Now, the other thing I want to point out is the secondary weapon. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. You're using a shotgun. Is that good against bosses or really tough enemies? Well, if you actually practice with a shotgun, you can get really good at dodging bosses and getting point blank up in their face and not getting wrecked. So that is something I wanted to point out. But the secondary weapon, I personally think for a build like this, should be something that will give you some defense. Now, you do have the option to actually buff your damage even further. In fact, I actually have a weapon, it's a legendary, that will give me like 43% more weapon damage, which is nice. I also have that pistol I talked about, which is legendary, that can give me 20% shotgun damage, which is also nice, and I really do love this pistol, and this is a nice ranged option. But if I wanted to buff my damage any further, I could. But the point is that I don't really want to. I want the defense. That way I will not die if I get hit by certain attacks. Having a defensive secondary weapon, I think, is a very good idea. This one came with 95% armor and 60% shields. And that way, I'm just extremely tanky. That's just the reality of it. So I would definitely recommend trying to find a weapon that will give you either armor or shields, or both if possible, because that will definitely help you out for GM1. Now, for my grenade, I am using the Frost Grenade, and I personally would probably recommend the Frost Grenade just because anytime you're dealing with a strong enemy, you can always freeze it, which is nice for you and your team. But this particular one came with 21% more damage. Actually, it came with 24% more damage and 18% more shotgun damage. So that's the reason why I'm actually using it. Now, another grenade I do like is actually this fire grenade I have. It's legendary. This one came with 30% weapon damage, but it also came with 15% marksman rifle damage, and I actually use that whenever I'm using the Thunderbolt. And what I really do like about the fire grenade, I like the effect. It is good whenever it actually procs. But the other thing is, if you are playing with Colossuses, if they freeze a big enemy, you can combo that enemy and then set them on fire and combo them again, and then normally the Colossus will freeze it again, and then you can combo again. So you can get 3 combos when you combine fire and ice. You just have to wait for the combos to go off, and then pretty much melt the ice, and then the Colossus will freeze the enemy and put out the fire. So that is a really cool thing that you can do, and I definitely would potentially recommend that. But whenever you're playing solo, or if you're playing with randoms, I think the ice grenade is just better, just because you never know when you're in a situation where you feel like you need to freeze the enemy, and it will help you out a lot. Now, for my assault launcher, once again, you have the option to go for something that can buff your weapon damage, but I really love this legendary I got. It's just so good. The main reason is because it came with 200% gear charges. Now, the Avengers Boon is actually pretty insane. It hits extremely hard. It can actually crit enemies, and that's really the reason why. Now, because this is a pulse blast, you might think that this is blast damage. It is not. It is impact. Remember, impact is generally things that will hit a single target. Blast is normally things that have AoE. And this is a single target, so this is impact damage. Now, with this current setup I have with all the buffs to impact, this thing can consistently hit for about 20k with a crit, which is pretty ridiculous. If I would have got 200% more gear damage instead of charges, I would imagine that this thing would hit for 50k, which would be pretty insane. It would probably one-shot almost every enemy in the game. So that would be amazing. But unfortunately, I did get the 200% charges, but I can't complain too much because being able to shoot this thing 3 times is really nice, especially if you are using a shotgun or something like that. This gives you range. And the other thing is that this will strip shields in one hit pretty much consistently on GM1 against all the enemies that have shields. If you can get one of these that are masterwork and you get extra charges, or if you get more damage, I definitely would recommend this. I personally just feel like this is the best R1 attack that the Ranger actually has in terms of just overall damage, especially if you buff your impact damage. Now for the support gear, I'm just using the general bubble shield for defense. Normally I would use this just to go in, put it down, res an ally. But what I like about this one is that it actually gives me 30% more shields, so that's really nice. If I combine that with the weapon I have, that's like 90% more shields, 95% more armor, so that definitely helps me stay alive, and it makes me extremely tanky. Now the last thing I want to quickly do is actually show you my farming setup with this, because I actually do have a farming setup. The only difference with this is some of the components. One thing is I'm actually using a different Avengers boon. This one has luck on it, 30%. And then for my support gear, I have one that I crafted that gives me 30%. It actually gives me 18% more damage for my R1, which is nice. And then finally, I think that one of my masterwork components has luck on it. You only want 90% luck. That's pretty much the cap, so that's what you're looking for. And there you go. That's my luck version of this. I still have the impact resistance, which is nice for the defense. I'm still using the same weapon lineup. Now this scout rifle, by the way, I just want to say, isn't that good, but it's actually not bad with this build. It can hit like 10k on bosses, so that's really not bad. But at the same time, I just don't think it's all that good. I don't really care about the effect, but I'm just using it for the defense, and I would recommend trying to find a weapon, hopefully a really good one that will come with armor and or shields to really buff you. I actually do have another one which gives me 170% more shields, and I'm definitely going to maybe put this on my Storm or something just because of the shields. But yeah, you get the idea. Alright, so now I'm going to show some gameplay of what this build can do, especially with the Pop-Up Pump. This build will absolutely buff the hell out of any of your weapons. And with the Pop-Up Pump, it makes that thing hit so hard, it is ridiculous. Alrighty guys, so here's going to be the gameplay, and something crazy is going to happen in this gameplay, and it kind of changes things. Although the build, I don't think it's going to change all that much, but it might slightly, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a moment here. But first off, I'm just using my Pop-Up Pump and absolutely destroying everything. Now, this Pop-Up Pump with this current setup can hit for 3,000 damage with a headshot, and it will consistently one-shot any of the minion level enemies, and it can two-shot a lot of the stronger enemies, maybe three-shot other ones. It's extremely powerful, and I actually do like it a lot, even against bosses. And that's the thing, I think a lot of people might be intimidated to actually try to shotgun bosses because they can wreck you. But when you combine like decent defense with good offense, and you kind of learn the patterns of a boss, you can absolutely shotgun any boss in the game. It does not matter. You just have to learn how to dodge the moves and know when it's doing its moves and that kind of stuff. So normally I always just shotgun everything, including bosses. And in fact, the one enemy that I thought was the worst to shotgun was Titans. But now I actually think that shotgunning Titans is amazing, just because you can actually get a Titan into like a permanent melee lock where the Titan will just keep trying to melee me and I'll keep dodging it and it keeps opening up. And because it's just trying to melee me, it's not sending out any fireballs or fire waves, nothing, and my teammates are just able to sit back and shoot at it every time it opens up. And that's it pretty much, and it can even bug out. And there you go. I got a legendary item while just killing these basic enemies. Now, all these enemies are elite. This is actually in free play. This is a dungeon, and whenever you do like a free play dungeon, you will come across primarily a lot of elite enemies, and there will always be a legendary enemy in here. Now, one thing I've noticed about legendary items, I tend to always get them from like basic minion enemies. I don't know if I've ever gotten one from something really powerful. It seems like it's always from the minions. So as you can see, I absolutely wrecked that guy. Now, one thing I will say about that shotgun is that shotgun can do up to 4,000 damage with acid and a bunch of damage buffs. Okay, so this was my legendary. I actually got this gambit. Now, the thing about this weapon I'm not a big fan of. I wasn't. But this thing came with 350% physical damage, which is insane. Now, I didn't talk about physical damage, but the thing is, physical damage can actually buff your weapon damage. That's why you'll still see it on a lot of weapons, because anything that's physical is pretty much not elemental, and it will actually up your gun damage. So having 350%, that's pretty insane, and this thing absolutely shreds. It is ridiculous. Now, in a way, I wish I would have actually got the sledgehammer version more, just because that thing already has a lot of damage on it. It can buff its fire rate. It's pretty crazy for DPS, and if it had like an insane amount of damage buff, that would be amazing. But oh my god, I think that this is now going to become my new main weapon, and because of this, I'm actually switching up my loadout here. I actually went ahead and put venom darts on, and I put the fire grenade. The fire grenade is the one I actually showed with the 30% weapon damage and the marksman rifle damage. And the venom darts, they have like 29% damage in general on them, and that's it. Everything else isn't that good with them, but still, like, oh my god, man. And what's really cool about this weapon that I didn't actually realize is that whenever you do a combo, it does like a huge AoE combo. It's pretty much kind of like detonating a combo with the storm. I guess it's like a chain combo instead of an impact combo. And because of that, if you set up one enemy and then you detonate in a group, every enemy is going to take damage from that. And that's really, really crazy. And like I said, I don't actually even have to use a detonating power with this weapon. I could just use the weapon to detonate. Now, the combos are kind of weak just because I'm not hitting them with another power to do extra damage. But still, having that AoE combo, and knowing that I play with a lot of Colossuses, and there's a lot of people who like Colossus, this thing will be great with them. Absolutely, I'm so freaking ecstatic that I actually got this weapon. I couldn't believe it. I got it while I was actually filming the gameplay. And the only thing I might change on this build, besides like the equipment I already talked about, I might actually go for more combo damage and swap out my assault launcher recharge speed. But that's pretty much it. Alrighty guys, well, that's going to do it for the video. I really hope that you have enjoyed this and that this has helped. If it has, will you please like the video for me? Be sure to subscribe for future videos, and I really do hope that everyone has a very nice day, and peace out.